Hello fellow gamers and welcome to my review of Wild Bastards. You're going to be hearing the word bastards quite a lot in this review. It's not meant in any way to offend or insult anyone, that's just the name of the game and there's not much I can do about it. Wild Bastards is the latest cel-shaded strategic single-player first-person shooter from gaming studio Blue Manchu. It's touted as the spiritual successor to 2019's Void Bastards, a charming rogue-lite FPS that saw you traveling through space and looting parts to build new equipment and repair key instruments on your spacecraft. It still holds up today and I highly recommend it, but that's not what we're here for. Let's dive into what I find great and not so great about Wild Bastards. Set in the wild frontiers of space, you are being hunted by the Chased family, and you embark on a quest to reach a place known as the Homestead. Along the way, you resurrect a medley of gang members, each with their own personalities and abilities. Exposition is delivered through fully voiced dialogue, driving the story forward as you explore new sectors in space. I'll be honest, I found myself tiring of the Western frontier drawl and skimming through a lot of the dialogue, but that's just me.
And just what do you circus freaks think you're up to now? Stealing daddy's stuff were bad enough. Now you're digging up dead bastards too?
You can rescue up to 13 outlaws in total, each bringing some more exposition to further unfold the story. It's not a very convoluted story though, it has its twists and turns, and I found it very entertaining. But Wild Bastards doesn't even need a strong focus on its story, its strength lies in its gameplay loop. The core loop is simple. Using your newly acquired spacecraft called the Drifter, you warp to a new system of planets and then embark on a journey from planet to planet. Each planet locks you in and prevents you from simply warping to the next one until you've beamed some of your outlaws down to clear things up on the surface. The surface of the planet consists of a series of roadblocks that you need to fight through in first-person showdowns before you can progress through to more loot and your eventual escape from the surface. It's not as linear as it sounds though, as it's all randomized. A feature that can either make things easier or a lot more difficult, but I'll talk more about that later. You can normally beam a handful of outlaws down to the surface and there you can group them into pairs, or if you're confident, send each individual in a different direction. The pairing system allows you to create some really powerful combos in showdowns. These showdowns are where you're going to be spending most of your time. It is the first-person shooter part of the game. They seem quite simple, set in smaller arenas of different styles. You go in with the intent to eliminate all of the bad guys. Take heed though, they might seem simple, and you might be tempted to rush through them, but these require a bit of finesse and tact to get through. This creates variation in the maps. You might seek the higher ground, or perhaps find yourself sneaking around corners to try and catch the enemies unaware. Further variation comes in the form of the bad guys, with three primary archetypes, namely Chasteners, the human variant out to kill you, Critters, and finally Security, which usually comes in the form of a static barrel that pops out a laser cannon to roast your tootsies. When two outlaws go into a showdown together, you're able to tag team them at will, depending on which abilities you might need. This works well in that you might use Hop Along, one of the faster outlaws, to quickly reposition yourself before switching back to the Judge, a sniper type outlaw, to pick off targets from a distance. You'll also have chatter from the inactive outlaw, either chastising your poor performance or perhaps giving you indications of where the enemies are. There are 13 outlaws in total, as I've mentioned, bringing a lot of variation to the playstyle, as each has their own strengths and abilities. Most of these abilities are passive, but each outlaw also has an activated ability they can use if they drink some juice, a consumable pickup you find scattered around showdowns, as well as a charged ability, which is also passive, but only works when that particular outlaw is full on energy, a resource that goes down as they leave showdowns. New core abilities are gained by picking up cards that level your outlaws up, or by picking up specific ability cards as you search around the map. These abilities are permanent and will stick with your outlaws throughout the game. On the flip side, you also get equipment that will give your outlaws temporary buffs, but these will only last until the end of the sector. At the end of the sector, most of your resources gets destroyed, and all that remains is the infamy you gained during that sector, which will then be exchanged for early buffs at the start of the next sector. Among the various pickups, you also get more generalized pickups, like beacons that allow you to beam up from the planet anywhere and anytime you want to, tonics that allow you to revive injured outlaws, and beans. Yep. Beans. You see, between your outlaws there exists this rudimentary relationship mechanic. Two outlaws can be friends, in a feud, or entirely indifferent to each other. And when two outlaws are feuding, they can't beam down together, breaking up what could be a great duo. However, when they're friendly with each other, they help each other out in combat by dropping special abilities or pickups when you need it most. I think this relationship mechanic, alongside charged abilities, is a way that developers try to encourage different team-ups and for the player to play with different outlaws. I'd often find myself relying heavily on a particularly powerful pairing like Casino and Judge, for instance, but then they'd get into an argument and I'd have to pick one over the other. Though this can be frustrating, I get it. It forces you to change your playstyle, and it can all be sorted out with some beans. Beans are used to either repair broken relationships or improve on indifferent ones, but they can be a scarce resource in times of need, so keep that in mind. To further complicate things, your time on the surface of the planet is limited. You might not be able to achieve everything you wanted to, as after a few turns the princes of the Chased family will start landing to hunt you down. Children of the big boss, Chased himself, these horse riding enemies add increasing difficulty to the game until eventually the big cheese himself shows up, forcing you off the planet one way or another, as he can't be defeated. As is often the case with games that are heavy on random number generation, or RNG for short, the difficulty can vary quite a bit. Some showdowns are super easy, often leading you into a false sense of security only for one poorly planned showdown to put you back in your place. Add to this that even the best laid plans of mice and men can be subverted when the RNG decides that your favorite pairing of outlaws are now in a feud, and you can't pair them up again until you find a can of beans, which the RNG has also decided will not be until much later in the game. But that's RNG for you. In short, the difficulty is fine. Frustrating sometimes and forgiving sometimes. I'm playing on normal difficulty and have run into my fair share of troubles, but I've also never really hit a roadblock and have yet to fail entirely. Your outlaws can't die. If they're killed in a showdown, they are returned to the ship as injured and will wait to be revived with a tonic or until you move to a new sector. I think the biggest barrier in difficulty is getting to know your outlaws and your enemies. As you move around planets, you'll find data on the enemies you're fighting, and studying these can help greatly in understanding their behavior and their weak spots. Finally, once the princes arrive, things turn up considerably. Your outlaws will already be tired and weakened from fighting, so running is likely your best option. That being said, even though these princes are increasingly tougher to kill with a larger health pool and more armor than most enemy types, they are not exempt from special abilities, making outlaws like Casino, whose ability instantly kills a random nearby enemy, a very potent choice if you decide to fight them. Eventually, after all the princes have arrived, the head of the Chased family arrives, and he is unbeatable, ultimately shooing you off the planet by forcing you to beam up willingly or by injuring all of your outlaws. I just wanted to take a quick beat here to ask you if you enjoy this content and you like this video. I would really appreciate if you leave a like and subscribe to my channel. I always say if you don't have good graphics, you'd better have good artistic style, and Wild Bastards goes for the latter. This is where it takes things right from Void Bastards' playbook, with beautifully cel-shaded environments and 2D sprites that fit really well with the cartoon-style narrative delivery. It works for the game, and there's nothing to complain about. It's a reminder that it's focused on the tactical shooter element of it and not a sightseeing mission. Though, that's not to say the environments don't look good. They each have their own unique setting, depending on various circumstances, and this brings a certain charm to the game. On the performance side of things, everything is well optimized. I had no problems whatsoever. It's not the type of game designed to tax your system with things like ray tracing or individually animated strands of hair. There are no options for DLSS or any other sort of upscaling because you simply don't need it. One thing I would have loved to see though was the return of the animated comic strips from Void Bastards. Instead, we get mostly still images to dispense dialogue and exposition. Not a deal breaker, I was just a huge fan of the comic strips of the spiritual predecessor. Moving on to sound, there's nothing to brag about in this department. It's all pretty standard stuff. They did a good job of positional audio during showdowns though, and this is quite clever as little audio cues are imperative to locating enemies around the map. And these cues are plentiful, whether it's the bad guys chatting to each other or a critter making footsteps on the other side of the wall.
Oh, I ain't gonna hurt you. Where in tarnation arrives?
I would note though, these same audio cues also show up on the compass for anyone playing with hearing difficulties or perhaps simply playing on mute. Lastly, the music is very fitting with a wild western frontier theme, and you can purchase the soundtrack separately if it's your kind of jam. To Blue Manchu's credit, Wild Bastards suffers no shenanigans, there are no microtransactions and there were no pre-order bonuses. The game is designed as an experience from beginning to end with no empty promises of future DLC or updates. One would think that this shouldn't need to be said, but in today's world it's something to be appreciated and you love to see it. To further add to their credit, it takes almost no time to get into the game. A quick title screen and you're on the main menu with little to no loading times. Even more so, no invasive anti-cheat or DRM gets installed alongside the game. Lastly, the game auto-saves progress as you go and you're free to drop out at any time to return to the same spot later. If we look at the settings menu, we have some stock standard graphics settings. I'm happy to report ultra-wide support out of the box, and as mentioned earlier, no upscaling required like DLSS or FSR. I like that I can change which display the game uses as well as my FOV and preferred gamma. In terms of quality, we have a simple slider to adjust quality from low all the way to ultra. No detailed settings here, but I think the simplicity of the graphics don't really warrant it. Moving on to the audio menu, you can either adjust master volume or the music volume independently if you find it too loud, and you can also disable narrative voice audio if, like me, you found the overused drawl to get a bit on your nerves. You can adjust the dynamic range of your chosen output. This is very important when you're trying to establish direction and distance of enemies. Further, in the gameplay menu, we can change certain things like toggling our aim and our run. We can do move smoothing and look smoothing, though I don't quite know what those do yet. And you can change it so that when you hit the shift button to run, you will stand up. You can fully customize your keyboard controls should you want to. I found the default controls to work just fine. And you can also customize your mouse sensitivity, zoom sensitivity, invert pitch if you're an aeroplane, and add mouse smoothing if you felt like it. Lastly, for our controller, we can change certain settings like our sensitivities as well as our acceleration and our dead zones. You can also enable or disable aim assist and switch on or off your vibration. You can see a full mapping of your controller should you choose to. However, I think if you were going to change this, you'd probably change it in whatever software came with the controller itself. In 2019, Void Bastards brought a cool sci-fi story and style to the rogue-lite genre. Its spiritual successor, Wild Bastards, brings its own style with each sector acting as a run and the abilities and characters you unlock along the way joining you for the next run. I'm sure there are some ways in which Wild Bastards could have been better, but I also don't think Blue Manchu left anything out because of constraints. They had a clear vision of what they wanted to deliver, and given the level of polish of their finished product, I think they can pat themselves on the back for having delivered it. I've played about 10 hours and I'm still enjoying it. I would say that it's not the type of game that you play through in one sitting, but given how quickly it gets going from launching the game to being in a showdown, it's great for pick up and play. If you can stomach the random swings in difficulty, then I can definitely recommend Wild Bastards. Thanks for joining me, please take care of yourself, and I'll see you all in the next video.